Barriers to Ghana's economic recovery. Interesting. I would group Ghana's biggest barriers of economic recoveries into two. The first being mechanical, and the second being psychological. The mechanical barriers are related to the things that are operational, the things that have to do with leadership decisions, and the things that have to do with structures. And when you come to the psychological, you talk of cultural issues and how we've been socially engineered. For me, none of these is greater than the other. I'll pick it from the second. The psychological issues, social engineering, religious, cultural. You see, you can pick a child of a year old and decide to train that child into whatever you want. You can train the child into becoming a doctor. You can train the child into becoming a footballer. You can train the child into becoming a painter. Because arguably, we all come into the world with a clean sheet. Of course, I must admit that there are other schools of thoughts that say that we are a mosaic of the genes of our external families. But when a child is born, they are born into an environment and they pick what they see, they pick what they hear, they pick what they are exposed to. If you are born into an environment of success, success is not impossible to you. If you are born into an environment of failure, you can barely do things with excellence because failure is so normalized in your brain cells that you don't see anything wrong with it. You cannot understand why it has to change. And that is why we have leaders who are exposed, who have studied in developed countries, but they still cannot implement what they have seen at the places that they've studied because they've already been wired in their childhood. This wiring, this social engineering, this early and initial socialization of the child or the Ghanaian child is one of the biggest barriers to our development. You will never go to any school in the United Kingdom, any school in China, any school in Singapore, where children do not know the history of their country, where they do not know the things that are needed for the development of the nation. You will not go to United Kingdom where children are being taught things about Ghana. But you enter a Ghanaian school randomly and you hear children sing London Bridge is falling down. This creates an urgency in their minds that is not to our advantage but to the advantage of the West. Because in their minds, they feel that the problem that they have to solve is in the West. They need to help the white person to fix it. Meanwhile, the Odo River is full of garbage. Meanwhile, Circle, we call it Dubai, is such an acrid. This is one of the barriers that is stampeding our development or impeding our development. Then there is the mechanical problem. Last time when I met you, I gave you one of the mechanical problems, which is inflation. The other one is currency depreciation. And like I said from the beginning, these are leadership decisions. These are structural implementations. They are decisions that have to be made by the government. They are decisions that have to be made by civil servants. They are decisions that have to be made by DCEs, regional ministers, and what have you. There are even decisions that have to be made by the citizens. They are operational. Now, talk of currency depreciation. There are countries that keep their currencies below the US dollar, which is usually the benchmark, on purpose. And the reason they do that is to keep their products at a competitive price. For example, the Chinese government does not want the Chinese yuan to outcompete the US dollar, because the Chinese government wants to create a net exporting country. A net exporting country means that the country moves goods out more than they bring goods in. And in order to make the goods you are taking out desirable, apart from the quality of the goods, you have the price of the goods. And by so doing, you have to keep your currency slightly below the benchmark. This is how countries make their economies net exporters. In Ghana, we have politicized everything. We have had politicians in the last 15 to 20 years promising that they'll make the cedi even stronger than the US dollar. You heard it first from here. This is a mathematical impossibility. It will never happen in our lifetime. The cedi will never be able to outcompete the dollar. What we can do is to stabilize the currency. There is a difference between currency stabilization and currency appreciation. Worst of all, what we can do is to get our currency appreciate against gold. That's what we have to do. Keep the currency stable, forget about the US dollar, and create a net exporting economy. We need to produce the things we use. We need to produce what we eat. We need to produce what we wear. We need to produce what we watch. If we are able to do that, we can keep our currency stable. The prices of consumer items would not depend on the strength of the US dollar anymore. This is how you make the economy strong. You have fixed inflation, you have fixed currency depreciation. Everything begins to work. The country begins to fix itself. Interest rates begin to reduce, and people begin to get access to credit. If people are not able to access credit, how can they start businesses? How can they build the empires that we need and employ people? If anybody says that they know exactly how Ghana got into this situation, I would say they are being arrogant. We can attempt to explain how we got here, but we can only go as far. But as you all know, the real problem is leadership. But aside from leadership, the real problem is capital. If people don't have access to capital, it's impossible for the economy to grow. But how do people get access to capital if the money is not in the country? This is what brings us to mechanical decisions, the mechanical decisions that I spoke about earlier. The country has to be investor friendly. We need to create a country that makes it desirable for people to put their money in. Think about this. In Ghana, interest rates are hovering currently around 25 to 29%. That means that if you purchase a treasury bill, you're expecting 27% at the end of the year. But why is it that hedge funds and multi-billion-dollar investment companies in G7 countries are not putting their money here to get 27%? Why are they struggling to get 13, 15%, 8% in the United States, in United Kingdom and Canada? That's a big question, isn't it? The reason they are not doing that is because, first of all, there's purchasing power problem. Any asset that you buy that is denominated in an inferior currency would give you an illusion of a higher interest rate. But by the time you take that money out, you would not be able to buy the thing that you plan to buy the returns of the investment with. The price would have shot up already. So for example, inflation is 26 or 25% in Ghana currently. And treasury bill rate is around 27%. What that means is that the real return is 2%. That is the real return. Aside from the real return, there is a general country risk, or what we call spread or default risk, which means that the country has the tendency of not paying back their loans. They have the tendency of collapsing banks. They have the tendency of not giving you the returns on the investment. And so even if the country is promising 50% interest on my investment, I will still not put my money there. This is why there is no money in the country. This is why nobody is bringing his money into the country. This is why you don't have access to capital. That is one side of the issue. Another part is that we don't have an integrated ID and address system. You may ask, how is this related to capital accessibility? Well, if I am a bank and I am not sure of where you are when you come for my money, I will put high interest on the money that you are taking. And the grace period will be very, very short because I want to take my money back as soon as possible before you'll be gone. So one of the first issues that we have to address in creating liquidity and capital in the country is building a functional integrated ID and address system. The next thing that we have to address is property titling. And with property titling, the most general one is land titling. Tell me in the comments how difficult it is to get a land title in Ghana. Without these things, you cannot have access to capital because it is your land and your property that you are using as collateral. This is how you create a credit economy. This is how you can reduce interest rates. This is how you can reduce fear of people not paying the bank back. This is how you make the economy desirable for foreign investors. That's how you build a country. You create credit and you empower people to access the credit and build businesses. You create capital and what I call patient capital, money that the bank doesn't need tomorrow, money that the bank can give to you for 30 years at an interest rate of 5% to build that monstrous business. This is what we are looking for as a country. And until then, we can never dream of becoming the next Switzerland, the next Austria, the next Singapore, the next South Korea. The issue of corruption is such a big bane for our country. We need to move government infrastructure onto a blockchain network, period. You see, when people have the leeway to do what they want to do, they will do what they want to do. That's how it works. And every human being takes the path of least resistance. If money is available for the individual to steal without being caught, without being tried, without being prosecuted, they will steal. So you don't give the room for people to do what you don't want them to do. You don't create the temptation. You make it hard for people to do what is undesirable. This is why we preached integrating blockchain in government processes. In Pillar 11, we spoke about data sovereignty and moving government processes onto the blockchain network. This way, we have all transactions, we have all files, we have all government records on an immutable chain of blocks that cannot be erased and that cannot be kept by one individual. We need to create a private blockchain that is accessible to Ghanaians. This can last for centuries. Once the individual knows that any processes, any transactions has, as it were, a block trail that can never be erased, they will think twice about their movements. They will think twice about how they are doing procurements. They will think twice about how they are awarding contracts. This is how you can prevent corruption in Ghana and in Africa as a whole. Without this, there is nothing we can do. In terms of unemployment, we addressed in the 12 pillars, the very first pillar, with the 16 regional industrial revolution. This is a vision to create 8 million jobs within a space of 8 years. How do you do this? You do this by harnessing the resources in each region and putting at the helm of affairs regional CEOs, not regional ministers. The ministers are politicians, but CEOs will be businessmen who understand the industry, who understand business processes, marketing, who understand manufacturing, value chains, and supply chain, who can actually deliver. And these people will be given minimum acceptable requirements and minimum deliverables within specific deadlines. This way, you create jobs within communities, you create jobs within constituencies, you create jobs within electoral areas. We need to think of economic federalism. And what I mean by economic federalism is moving money across the entire nation, decentralizing where the money is, decapitalizing the nation, and move capital everywhere. This is economic federalism. Make the regions semi-autonomous. Make the regions, give them the ability to cater for themselves. Give the regions the ability to provide for themselves, to serve themselves, to build their own schools, to build their own hospitals. If everything is coming from the central government, we will fail in addressing debt. We need to clearly define the type of debt we are accessing. Is it external debt or domestic debt? Ordinarily, debt is not a bad thing, if only what you are using the debt for can produce enough income to service the debt. 2, if the debt is not denominated in a foreign currency, you have some ability to control it. One of our problems is that we have too high of an external debt. Almost 40% of our national debt is external, is owned to foreigners. If it happens this way, the depreciation of our currency creates a serious problem for us, because the amount that we borrowed initially has gone up at the time that we want to pay the debt back. And so we need to empower the Ghanaian people such that they would have disposable income, such that they would have what we call short-time preference. This means that they would not have anything to do with their money, and so they will give their money happily to the government to use for infrastructural projects. This way, money that you would have borrowed from the IMF or the World Bank or the Japanese government would be provided to you by the Ghanaian people, because they have disposable income. They have money sitting there that they don't know what to do with. The role the Ghanaian should play in our transformation is, first of all, to choose the right leader. I am tempted to say that we deserve our leaders. We choose the leaders that we deserve, because if good people are willing to lead the country and we tell them that their time is not up, then we deserve what we have. We deserve to be where we are. The pain is not enough. I will try not to be too political, but at the same time, I'll be honest. If we keep doing the same thing, we should not expect different results. The current leadership is a leadership we have seen before. There is almost nobody in government who has not been in government before. And so, if they couldn't do it 8 years ago, as a logician, I find it difficult to believe that they can do it now. But maybe people repent. Let's see. All that we have, apart from human resource, is our natural resource. It is what God has blessed us with. You know, Ghana is very similar to Saudi Arabia and Australia. Let's start from Australia. Australia is a highly developed country. But amongst all the developed countries, you can argue that Australia has the least patents. It has the least inventions. The only reason Australia is surviving is its natural resources being harnessed properly, and good leadership, competent leadership that is able to put in place measures to create financial stability. That's all. There is nothing that the country of Australia has that we don't have. The only difference is leadership. If we were able to harness our natural resources and control it and make it ours and own it as Australia has, we will be as developed as Australia. Same as Saudi Arabia. What can you think of Saudi Arabia apart from oil? Tell me one thing. It's the first thing that comes into your mind. But you can have about 10 or 11 different things that comes to mind when you mention Ghana. But they are all natural resources. The only difference is leadership. Competent leadership. Ghana's top 5 priorities in the next 5 to 10 years. First, address inflation. Second, address currency depreciation. Third, overhaul the constitution. 4, overhaul the education system. 5, create an integrated ID and address system. All these we need to do in tandem with creating economic federalism with the help of the 16 regional industrial revolution, with the help of the water connection and regional integration. That's how you do it. That's how you can make all the above sustainable. My name is Hubert Bedu, Lead Economic Analyst of the New Force. I want to see your questions in the comments. Also, tell us the topics that you might want us to address in the next episode. Until then, bye-bye.